I'm Sylvester, 34, and when my father died last year, the will reading changed my life forever. My sister Natalie inherited everything valuable, the house, the business, all investments. Me, I got a useless plot of dirt that everyone laughed about. What nobody expected was how that worthless inheritance would transform into millions, or that my sister would suddenly reappear, demanding her fair share of my success. Before I dive into how my dirt pile turned into millions, let me know where you're watching from, and hit that subscribe button if you've ever had family. Try to take what's yours after dismissing you for years. Growing up in rural Pennsylvania wasn't always easy, but we had a comfortable life thanks to my father Gregory's determination. Dad built his construction business from nothing into a regional powerhouse through sheer grit and countless 16-hour workdays. Our modest home gradually transformed into a beautiful two-story colonial as his business grew. Mom managed the books while Dad handled the contracts and crews. They were a perfect team. My sister Natalie was 4 years older than me and seemed to inherit Dad's business instincts from day one. She was always calculating, planning, figuring out angles. Even as kids, she would organize neighborhood businesses, lemonade stands with strategic pricing, lawn mowing services with tiered packages. Dad beamed with pride watching her natural entrepreneurial spirit. "She's got the Collins business sense," he'd tell everyone at family gatherings, while I quietly played with my rock collection in the corner. That was the thing about me. I never fit the Collins construction legacy mold. While Natalie shadowed Dad at building sites, I was fascinated by the earth itself. The different colored layers in roadside cuts, the unique properties of clay versus sand, the fossils hidden in limestone. By 12, I could identify 20 different types of rocks and explain how each formed. Mom encouraged this interest, buying me geology books and microscopes for birthdays, but Dad always seemed puzzled by it. "Rocks don't pay the bills, son," he'd say, not unkindly but with genuine confusion. "Construction builds things people need. It creates value." He never said it directly, but the implication was clear. My interests were impractical curiosities, not serious career paths. The real tension began when I decided to attend Colorado State University for environmental science, instead of the local community college business program Dad had mapped out for me. The night I announced my decision was the first major family argument I remember. "We have a third-generation family business waiting for you," Dad said, his voice rising with frustration. "People in this town would kill for that opportunity." "But I don't want to build things, Dad. I want to understand what we're building on," I tried explaining. "Environmental consultants are crucial for sustainable development." "Consultants," he scoffed. "People who tell others what to do instead of doing it themselves." Natalie, 22 and already working full-time in the family business, stood silently behind Dad, a slight smile on her face. She had completed her business degree locally, while living at home, saving money, and cementing her position as the dutiful child. I left for Colorado that August, and something fundamentally changed in our family dynamic. Phone calls became less frequent, holiday visits more strained. I finished my undergraduate degree, and then completed a master's in geological engineering, occasionally sending articles about environmental construction innovations to Dad, hoping to bridge our divide. He rarely responded. Meanwhile, Natalie rose through the company ranks, eventually becoming Chief Operations Officer. When Mom died unexpectedly from a stroke 5 years ago, the distance between Dad and me grew even wider. I flew home for the funeral, of course, but the conversations were superficial. The grief separate rather than shared. What I didn't fully understand until later was how Natalie had been subtly reinforcing my status as the family disappointment. A mutual childhood friend revealed years later that Natalie regularly made comments to Dad about how I abandoned the family and thought I was too good for honest work. When Dad faced health challenges after Mom's death, Natalie was there daily, cementing her role as his sole support system. My environmental consulting career in Denver was satisfying but modest compared to the Collins construction empire. I helped companies assess land for development, identify potential environmental concerns, and recommend sustainable approaches. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was doing exactly what I'd told Dad I wanted to do, yet he never showed any interest in understanding my work. 3 years ago, I made a serious attempt at reconciliation. I called Dad and suggested visiting for a week, perhaps shadowing him at work to better understand the business. His response was lukewarm. "Natalie keeps me pretty busy with appointments. Maybe around the holidays instead." The visit never materialized, and our calls returned to brief monthly check-ins that felt more like obligation than connection. What I didn't know then was that this familiar pattern of favoritism and distance was setting the stage for an inheritance situation that would ultimately transform both our lives in ways none of us could have imagined. The call came on a Tuesday morning in April. I was preparing for a field assessment when my phone lit up with Natalie's name, something that rarely happened. "Dad's in the hospital. Pancreatic cancer. Stage 4. They're saying weeks, maybe a month." Her voice was clipped factual as if reading a construction spec. I was on a flight to Pennsylvania that afternoon. The 3-hour trip felt like an eternity, my mind racing between regret over lost years and anxiety about what awaited me. By the time the taxi dropped me at Lancaster General Hospital, it was nearly midnight. Dad looked small in the hospital bed, his once powerful frame diminished by illness. Natalie sat in the corner scrolling through her phone. She barely looked up when I entered. "He's been in and out of consciousness," she said. "Don't expect much." For the next 2 weeks, I split my time between the hospital and a nearby hotel. Dad had moments of lucidity, but never enough for the meaningful conversation I craved. Mostly he slept or stared vacantly, while machines beeped around him. Natalie came for scheduled visits, always with paperwork or business calls to make in the hallway. I noticed she had Dad's medical power of attorney and seemed to be making all decisions with minimal consultation. When Dad passed, it was early morning. I had been reading quietly by his bedside while Natalie was at home sleeping. The nurse said sometimes people wait until they're alone to let go. I hoped it wasn't because he felt alone with me. The funeral was well attended, a testament to how many lives Dad had touched through his business and community involvement. Dozens of current and former employees shared stories of his fairness and generosity. Several mentioned how he had given them second chances after personal setbacks, or helped them purchase first homes. I sat in the front row next to Natalie, feeling like an imposter among people who seemed to know a version of my father I had never fully encountered. 3 days after the funeral, we gathered at the office of Marcus Johnson, Dad's attorney for over 20 years. The wood-paneled conference room felt suffocating as we waited. Natalie sat opposite me, composed in a black dress, occasionally checking her watch or phone. Marcus entered with a leather portfolio and a solemn expression. After brief condolences, he got straight to business. "As executor of Gregory Collins' estate, I'll now read the last will and testament signed and notarized 6 months ago." He began placing reading glasses on his nose. What followed was a systematic distribution of assets that felt like watching a one-sided tennis match. The family home valued at $850,000 to Natalie. Collins Construction Company, recently appraised at $2.3 million to Natalie. Investment and retirement accounts totaling $1.2 million to Natalie. Various personal items, including vehicles, art, and collectibles, primarily to Natalie, with a few specific items to longtime friends. With each bequest, Natalie's expression shifted from appropriate solemnity to poorly concealed satisfaction. I sat perfectly still, feeling a strange detachment, as if watching someone else's family drama unfold. "And to my son Sylvester Collins," Marcus finally said, looking at me with an unreadable expression, "I leave my 15-acre property located at 1782 Ridge Road parcel, number 4572319. The conference room fell silent. I knew the property, an overgrown rocky plot Dad had purchased decades ago as a potential development site before discovering it had poor drainage and unstable areas. It had sat unused for years, occasionally mentioned as a tax write-off. "That's it," I heard myself ask, voice hollow. Marcus nodded, seeming uncomfortable. "The assessed value is $42,000, though it's considered undevelopable in its current state." Natalie made a sound between a cough and a laugh. "Well, that seems fair. Dad built something valuable and you chose to dig in dirt for a living. Now you've got plenty to dig in." Marcus shot her a disapproving look before turning back to me. "There is one more item. Your father left this envelope to be given to you privately." He slid a sealed envelope across the table. My name was written in Dad's distinctive block handwriting. "I suggest you read it later," Marcus said quietly. The rest of the meeting passed in a blur of signatures and procedural explanations. Natalie discussed timeline details for transferring the business assets, while I sat silently, the unopened envelope burning a hole in my pocket. As we left the office, Natalie paused on the steps. "Don't look so shocked, Sylvester. You made your choice years ago when you left. Dad needed someone he could count on who understood the value of what he built." Her voice softened slightly. "For what it's worth, he did ask about you sometimes." I couldn't formulate a response that wasn't pure anger, so I simply walked away, the weight of apparent worthlessness pressing on my shoulders. Back in my hotel room, I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the envelope for nearly an hour, before finally tearing it open, unsure whether to expect explanation, apology, or final disappointment. The letter was a single-page, Dad's handwriting immediately recognizable. Strong, precise capital letters, the same style he used on construction plans. "Sylvester, sometimes what seems worthless to others holds great value. Trust your education. Look beneath the surface." Dad. That was it. No explanation, no emotional farewell, not even a complete sentence. Just a cryptic message that felt more like a riddle than a goodbye. I crumpled the paper in frustration, then immediately smoothed it out again, reading the words repeatedly, as if additional meaning might materialize. Was this some kind of test? A final lesson delivered in the same cryptic manner Dad had often used when I was young, or just the vague philosophical musings of a man facing mortality? I nearly tossed the letter in the trash, packed my bags, and booked the next flight back to Colorado. But something stopped me. Perhaps the same stubborn streak that Dad himself had passed down to me. "Fine," I muttered to the empty room. "I'll look at your worthless dirt before I leave." The next morning I rented a car and drove to the property. Ridge Road was appropriately named, running along a rocky elevation overlooking farmland below. I found the unmarked entrance easily enough, a rusted gate with a faded "No Trespassing" sign hanging askew. The 15 acres stretched upward along the ridge, mostly covered in scrubby vegetation and seemingly random rock outcroppings. I parked and began walking the perimeter, professional habit kicking in despite my lingering anger. The southern portion was heavily wooded with mature oak and maple trees, while the northern section featured the exposed rock formations that had likely made development difficult. But something about those formations caught my attention. Their unusual coloration and layering patterns didn't match the typical geology of this region. After an hour of exploration, I found myself examining soil samples, almost automatically rubbing the dirt between my fingers and observing the texture. In several areas, particularly near the largest rock outcropping, the soil had a distinctive reddish-purple tint I rarely encountered in Pennsylvania. I collected several samples in empty water bottles from my car, labeled them with location notes, and took dozens of photographs. "Trust your education," Dad had written. Well, my education told me something wasn't typical about this land. I drove to the local library and used their computer to research the geological history of the area. Most sources confirmed what I already knew. The region was primarily limestone and shale bedrock from ancient seabeds. But one obscure article from a 1967 geological survey mentioned anomalous mineral deposits discovered in a narrow band along the same ridge where Dad's property sat. The survey had been preliminary, with recommendations for further study that apparently never materialized. That evening, I emailed photographs and notes to Dr. Kenneth Williams, my former graduate advisor who specialized in rare earth mineralogy. I didn't expect an immediate response, but my phone rang within hours. "Sylvester, where exactly did you take these samples?" Dr. Williams's usual calm demeanor was replaced with barely contained excitement. "My father's property in Pennsylvania." "Why? What do you see?" "The coloration and formation patterns are consistent with several rare earth elements, possibly including neodymium and dysprosium. These aren't typically found in that region, which makes it particularly interesting. Of course, I can't confirm anything without proper testing, but if I'm right, this could be significant." Significant, how I asked, heart beginning to race. Rare earth elements are crucial components in everything from smartphones to electric vehicles to wind turbines. The U.S. has very few domestic sources, making any potential deposit extremely valuable. You need to get professional testing done immediately. The conversation shifted to technical details and testing recommendations, but my mind was already spinning with implications. Dad's worthless land might actually contain something valuable enough to explain his cryptic note. I extended my hotel stay indefinitely and contacted Burlington Geological Services, a reputable testing company with offices in Philadelphia. Their earliest available comprehensive survey was 3 weeks out and would cost $8,000, nearly wiping out my modest savings. I booked it without hesitation. While waiting, I divided my time between researching rare earth mining operations and exploring every inch of the property. I created detailed maps, took hundreds of soil samples, and read everything I could find about mineral rights and extraction regulations in Pennsylvania. The waiting was excruciating, but it gave me time to process a new possibility that my father might have known or at least suspected what lay beneath his seemingly worthless land. Had he given me something potentially valuable after all? And if so, why the secrecy? A memory surfaced from when I was perhaps 10 years old. Dad had taken me to a construction site where they were excavating for a foundation. While the crew worked, he picked up 2 rocks from the pile of excavated material. "Which one of these is more valuable, Sylvester?" he had asked. I examined them carefully. One was smooth, polished, and attractive, clearly a river rock someone had brought in for landscaping. The other was rough, ordinary, and caked with dirt. "The pretty one," I said confidently. Dad smiled and broke open the ordinary-looking rock with his hammer. Inside were beautiful purple crystals catching the sunlight. "Never judge by what you first see," he said. "Value isn't always obvious." Had that lesson been a precursor to this final test? Was I finally understanding a message Dad had been trying to communicate for decades? When Burlington Geological Services finally arrived with their equipment and team of 4 specialists, I watched their methodical process with nervous anticipation. They conducted core sampling, ground-penetrating radar surveys, and various chemical tests across the property for 2 full days. "We'll have preliminary results in about 10 days, the lead geologist told me as they packed up. "But off the record, you've got something interesting here. Very interesting." Those 10 days felt like 10 years, but when the results finally arrived by courier, they exceeded even my most optimistic hopes. The manila envelope from Burlington Geological Services contained 50 pages of technical data, but the executive summary told me everything I needed to know. Property assessment confirmed significant deposits of multiple rare earth elements, including neodymium, praseodymium, dysprosium, and terbium, in commercially viable concentrations. Conservative estimates place recoverable resources at approximately 820 metric tons across examined strata. Current market values would place unrefined material value between $20 and $30 million, with potential for higher valuation depending on concentration processes employed. I read the summary 4 times, hands trembling slightly. Then I called Dr. Williams. "You need independent verification," he advised after I shared the results. "And you need to be very careful about who you tell. Land values can skyrocket overnight with this kind of discovery." Following his recommendation, I contacted Westland Mining Corporation, one of the largest ethical mining operations in North America. They agreed to conduct their own survey under a confidentiality agreement, waiving their usual fee in exchange for first right of refusal on any potential contracts. Westland's results confirmed Burlington's findings and added several key details. The rare earth deposits appeared to extend throughout approximately 60% of the property, with the highest concentrations in the northern section. Their geologists estimated the deposit formed due to unusual hydrothermal activity millions of years ago, creating a rare pocket of valuable elements in an otherwise typical limestone region. "This is one of the most significant rare earth discoveries in the United States in decades," Westland's chief geologist told me, especially given current supply chain concerns with Chinese sources. As the magnitude of the discovery sank in, I found myself cycling between elation and confusion. The property that had seemed like a final insult from my father was potentially worth tens of millions. But had he known? And if so, why hadn't he simply told me? I returned to the property one afternoon, sitting on the largest rock outcropping and staring across the valley below, trying to understand my father's thinking. The wind rustled through the trees, and suddenly another childhood memory surfaced. I was 12, frustrated after receiving a complex model rocket kit for my birthday instead of the assembled one I'd wanted. Dad found me sulking in the backyard. "Some gifts require work before you see their value," he said, sitting beside me. "The satisfaction comes not just from having the thing, but from figuring it out yourself." Had this land been the ultimate version of that lesson, a gift that required me to use my education, my specific skills, to unlock its value, something Natalie, with all her business acumen, would never have appreciated or investigated. The theory gained strength when I visited the county records office and discovered Dad had purchased the property 27 years ago, right around the time I first showed serious interest in geology. He had held on to it all these years, paying taxes on seemingly useless land, perhaps waiting for the right moment to pass it on. With the verification complete, I began receiving offers. Westland proposed an immediate purchase for $12 million. Two other mining companies contacted me with similar figures after somehow learning of the discovery. All were substantial amounts, but my research suggested they represented only a fraction of the land's true potential value if developed correctly. I decided to take a different approach, scheduling a meeting with Elaine Parker, an environmental law specialist in Philadelphia who had extensive experience with mineral rights and sustainable resource development. "These companies are lowballing you," she confirmed after reviewing the geological reports. "But more importantly, an outright sale means losing control of how the land is developed. Given your background, I'm guessing that matters to you." She was right. The thought of my father's property being stripped without environmental safeguards was unacceptable. "What alternatives do I have?" I asked. "Partnership structures, operational leases with strict environmental covenants, or creating your own company to oversee development with contracted expertise," she explained. "Each has different implications for control, profit potential, and long-term responsibility." Over the next week, Elaine helped me explore these options, while news of the discovery began circulating in the local community. I received numerous inquiries, some professional, others less so, and realized I needed to make decisions quickly before speculation complicated matters further. After careful consideration, I decided to establish my own company to maintain maximum control over the development process. With Elaine's guidance, I incorporated GreenEarth Minerals, with a mission focusing on responsible resource extraction. The structure would allow me to partner with established mining operations while maintaining oversight of environmental practices and community impact. As preparations moved forward, I occasionally wondered what Natalie would think when she inevitably learned about the discovery. Would she understand Dad's choice? Or would she see it only as assets unfairly distributed? I would have my answer sooner than expected. Back in Colorado, I submitted my resignation and began liquidating my modest investments to fund initial business expenses. My colleagues were shocked by my sudden departure but supportive once I explained the circumstances, though I was careful to downplay the potential value involved. Taking over the family land was my simple explanation. Turns out my geology background might make it more valuable than anyone realized. With Elaine Parker's help, I assembled a team of advisors including a sustainable mining expert, an environmental impact specialist, and a financial strategist with experience in resource development. Together, we created a comprehensive business plan for GreenEarth Minerals that emphasized three core principles: minimal environmental disruption, local economic benefit, and long-term sustainability. The financing stage proved surprisingly straightforward once potential partners reviewed the geological data. Several technology manufacturers expressed interest in securing direct supply chains for rare earth elements outside of traditional sources, particularly given increasing geopolitical tensions affecting global markets. After evaluating 7 potential operational partners, I selected Thompson Sustainable Resources, a mid-sized company with an excellent environmental record and innovative extraction techniques that minimized water usage and surface disruption. Their CEO, Daniel Thompson, had a background in both engineering and environmental science, making our priorities naturally aligned. Most operations would blast and strip this whole ridge, Daniel explained during our site visit. We'll use targeted extraction focusing on the highest concentration areas, first maintaining most of the surface features and rehabilitating continuously rather than after depletion. The contract negotiations were intense, with Thompson initially pushing for majority control in exchange for covering all development costs. With Elaine's guidance, I held firm on maintaining 51% ownership and ultimate authority over environmental decisions. After 3 weeks of back and forth, we reached an agreement. Thompson would invest $28 million for operational development and receive 49% of profits for 20 years with strict environmental covenants, and local hiring requirements. The signing ceremony took place at the property itself, with our teams gathered near the main rock outcropping where I had first noticed the unusual coloration that started this journey. As we finalized the documents, I couldn't help wondering what Dad would think of this moment. While the legal and financial details were being finalized, I focused on community integration. I purchased a modest 3-bedroom home in the nearby town rather than something ostentatious, wanting to establish myself as a committed local resident rather than an absentee owner. I reached out to the township supervisors about our plans, emphasizing the local job creation potential and committing to road improvements affected by increased traffic. When extraction operations began in October, we employed 27 local workers, including several former Collins construction employees who recognized me from childhood. Their initial skepticism, the boss's son who had abandoned construction for playing in dirt, gradually transformed into respect as they saw our operations' emphasis on safety and environmental care. By December, the first shipments of processed materials were headed to manufacturing facilities, and the initial revenue exceeded projections by nearly 30%. Rare earth prices had increased due to supply chain disruptions in Asia, making our domestic source even more valuable than initially calculated. Throughout this whirlwind of activity, I occasionally heard updates about Natalie through mutual acquaintances. She had taken full control of Collins Construction, but was struggling to maintain client relationships that had been built on Dad's personal reputation. Several key employees had departed, citing management differences, and the company had lost bids on 2 major projects it would previously have secured easily. I considered reaching out, perhaps offering some connections to potential clients through my new business network, but hesitated. Our last interaction at the will reading still stung, and part of me felt she needed to learn her own business lessons without my interference. It was a decision I would soon reconsider. Living back in my hometown was an adjustment after years in Colorado. I found myself rediscovering places from childhood now viewed through adult eyes. Occasionally I visited Dad's grave, updating him on the business developments, as if he could hear. I never quite managed to articulate the complex mixture of gratitude and lingering hurt I felt, but the one-sided conversations were somehow therapeutic. "You were right about the land," I told the granite headstone on one winter visit. "I just wish we could have talked about it. I have so many questions I'll never get to ask you." The business continued growing steadily through the winter months. By February, GreenEarth Minerals was valued at approximately $42 million, with projections to double within 18 months as production increased. My personal net worth on paper had reached nearly $24 million, though most remained tied to the business rather than liquid assets. I maintained my relatively modest lifestyle, focusing on reinvesting in improved extraction technology and expanding our environmental monitoring systems. The only significant personal expenditure was establishing a college scholarship fund for local students interested in environmental science or sustainable resource management. After 8 months of operation, with spring beginning to transform the landscape, I arrived at my office one morning to find an unexpected visitor waiting in the reception area. Natalie sat primly in a visitor chair, dressed in a business suit that looked considerably more expensive than the company she now controlled could likely afford. "Hello, brother," she said with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I think it's time we had a family conversation." Natalie looked different from when I'd last seen her at the will reading. The confident, almost smug expression was replaced with something I couldn't quite identify, a strange mixture of friendliness and calculation that immediately put me on guard. "This is a surprise," I said, leading her into my office. "What brings you by?" She glanced around, taking in the modest furnishings and geological maps lining the walls. "Nice operation you've built here. Word travels in small towns. Very impressive what you've done with Dad's gift." The slight pause before gift carried volumes of unspoken meaning. "Thank you," I responded cautiously. "It's been an unexpected journey." Natalie settled into a chair, crossing her legs and adjusting her designer watch. Family is so important, don't you think? Especially now that it's just the two of us. Dad would want us to support each other. The abrupt shift to familial sentimentality from someone who had mocked my inheritance months earlier triggered immediate suspicion. I agree, family is important. It has been since before Dad died. If she caught my subtle dig, she didn't show it. Instead, she launched into catching up as if we were close siblings who simply hadn't spoken for a few weeks. She asked about my health, my experience moving back to Pennsylvania, even inquired about former colleagues in Colorado she had never met nor shown interest in before. After 20 minutes of this performative reconnection, she finally revealed her purpose. So Colin's construction is facing some challenges, she admitted, examining her manicured nails. The economy, rising material costs, labor issues. You know how it is. I heard there were some difficulties, I acknowledged. Losing key personnel can be tough. A flash of irritation crossed her face before the pleasant mask returned. Just some restructuring for efficiency. The real issue is that several major projects require capital investment up front, and the banks are being unreasonably cautious with construction loans in this climate. That sounds challenging, I said, not offering more. Well, that's where family comes in, doesn't it? Her smile widened. I've been thinking about how perfect it would be to integrate our businesses. Colin's construction could handle all the infrastructure development for your mining operation. Natural synergy plus keeping profits in the family. Dad would have loved that idea. I nearly laughed at her invocation of our father's wishes, but maintained a neutral expression. We've already contracted with specialized mining construction firms with specific expertise in this field. Those contracts can be renegotiated, she said dismissively. The point is, what you're doing here is remarkable, Sylvester, and family should share in remarkable successes. There it was, the real purpose of her visit. What exactly are you proposing, Natalie? She leaned forward, dropping all pretense of casual conversation. A partnership. Colin's construction is still worth over $2 million. Combined with your operation, we could create a true family empire. Or alternatively, a simple investment from you into Colin's to help us through this temporary cash flow situation. $5 million would be transformative, and such a small percentage of what you're generating here. I see, I said carefully. And what would I receive in return for this investment? She waved a hand vaguely. We can work out details. The important thing is supporting each other as Dad would have wanted. Dad seemed to have specific ideas about who should receive what, I reminded her. He gave you the established business, and me, an undeveloped property. Don't be disingenuous, she said, her tone sharpening. No one could have predicted this land contained valuable minerals. If Dad had known, he never would have structured things this way. Are you sure about that? I asked. His note to me suggested otherwise. Her eyes narrowed. What note? I explained the cryptic message Dad had left, watching realization dawn on her face. He knew, she whispered momentarily, dropping her composed facade. He gave you land worth millions deliberately, while making me think you got nothing. Her voice rose with each word. I believe he gave each of us what he thought we needed, I said. You got an established business with customer relationships and immediate value. I got land that required my specific knowledge to appreciate. That's convenient rationalization, she snapped, composure fracturing further. The reality is my inheritance is struggling while yours is thriving through pure luck of geological happenstance. I wouldn't call 8 months of intensive work luck, I replied, feeling my own temper rising. And if the construction company is struggling, perhaps that reflects management decisions rather than the inheritance itself. The conversation deteriorated rapidly from there. Natalie's carefully constructed friendliness evaporated, replaced by increasingly direct demands for what she called her fair share of the mineral discovery. We both know Dad wasn't thinking clearly in his final months, she declared. He was medicated, confused. If he truly understood the value distribution, he would have divided everything equally. That's not what his will specified, I reminded her. Wills can be contested, she shot back, especially when there's evidence of undue influence or hidden assets. Are you threatening legal action? I asked incredulously. "I'm suggesting we resolve this as family before attorneys become necessary," she replied, tone suddenly businesslike again. 20% ownership in GreenEarth Minerals transferred to me would be reasonable compensation for the disproportionate inheritance division. The audacity was breathtaking. After years of cultivating her position as the favored child, mocking my career choices, and openly gloating about her inheritance, she now wanted a significant portion of what my education and effort had created from Dad's final gift. "I think we're done here," I said, standing up. "I have no intention of transferring ownership to you or investing in Collins Construction. Your business challenges are yours to solve, just as I solved mine." Her face hardened as she gathered her purse. "You always were selfish, Sylvester, always thinking you were too good for the family business, too special to get your hands dirty with real work. Now you're too important to help your own sister." "That's a fascinating rewriting of history," I replied, holding the door open, "especially coming from someone who called my inheritance worthless dirt a few months ago." At the threshold, she turned back, expression cold. "Dad would be ashamed of your greed. My attorney will be contacting yours. Family should have shared in this discovery. And if you won't do the right thing voluntarily, there are legal remedies for unjust enrichment and hidden assets in estate settlements. Do what you feel you must," I replied calmly. After she left, I sat at my desk for nearly an hour, emotions cycling between anger, hurt, and oddly pity. The sister I remembered from earliest childhood, before competition for Dad's approval had soured our relationship, seemed completely gone, replaced by someone consumed by entitlement and resentment. Later that day, I called Marcus Johnson to warn him about Natalie's threats and inquire about their legal validity. "The will is solid," he assured me. "Your father was of sound mind, had a complete medical evaluation just before signing, and was very specific about his wishes. As for the mineral discovery that happened after the estate was settled based on your expertise, exactly as your father anticipated." "So there's no real legal threat?" I asked. "I didn't say that," Marcus cautioned. "Anyone can file a lawsuit, merit notwithstanding. It would likely be dismissed eventually, but could tie you up in expensive litigation for years, creating public records of your business operations and potentially complicating your partnerships. So even a meritless case could cause problems," I summarized. "Unfortunately, yes. Legal vindication sometimes comes at substantial practical cost." I thanked him and hung up, troubled by the implications. The rational business decision might be to offer Natalie some settlement just to avoid the distraction and potential complications of a legal battle, regardless of its merit. But something in me rebelled at the thought of rewarding her threats and entitlement. As darkness fell outside my office window, I found myself staring at Dad's letter again, wondering what guidance he would offer in this situation. The phrase "look beneath the surface" took on new meaning, perhaps applying not just to the land's hidden value, but to finding deeper solutions to the conflict now emerging. With that thought, an idea began forming, one that honored both Dad's legacy and my own values, while potentially addressing the family rift in an unexpected way. The certified letter from Bradford Winters and Associates arrived exactly as Marcus had predicted. The legal language was dense, but the message clear. Natalie was demanding equitable redistribution of concealed assets from our father's estate, claiming he lacked full knowledge of the property's value and that I had somehow concealed information during probate proceedings. Marcus called minutes after I notified him about receiving the letter. "This is thin legal reasoning," he assured me. "But as I mentioned, even weak cases can create headaches. How do you want to proceed?" "I need some time to think," I told him. "Can you delay any response for 2 weeks?" "Easily. These things move slowly anyway." During those 2 weeks, I found myself repeatedly returning to Dad's letter and the memories it had triggered. One evening, sitting on my back porch watching the sunset, I unfolded the worn paper and studied those few words again. Sometimes what seems worthless to others holds great value. Trust your education. Look beneath the surface. What struck me now wasn't just the guidance about the land's hidden minerals, but the broader philosophy those words represented. Dad had built his business not just to accumulate wealth, but to create something of lasting value for the community, jobs, infrastructure opportunities for others. The stories at his funeral had made that clear. Was I honoring that legacy by simply growing my own wealth, even if more responsibly than Natalie was managing hers. Or was there something deeper I could do with this unexpected fortune? The next morning I called Mayor Jacobson and scheduled a meeting to discuss a community development initiative. 2 days later I met with the local community college president about educational partnerships. By week's end, I had assembled an informal advisory group of community leaders to help shape an idea that had crystallized in my mind. When the 2-week period elapsed, instead of responding to the legal threat, I sent out invitations to a special town hall meeting to announce the formation of the Gregory Collins Community Development Fund, named in honor of my safe father. The meeting was scheduled for the community center on a Thursday evening. As people filed in, local business owners, teachers, former Collins construction employees, and curious residents, I noticed Natalie slipping into the back row, clearly wondering what I was planning. Standing at the podium, I felt an unexpected calm despite my sister's presence. My father believed in building things that last. I began. Not just structures, but opportunities, communities, and futures. When he left me what seemed like worthless land, he included a note saying, "Sometimes what seems worthless to others holds great value." He knew I would need to use my education to discover what he had suspected might be there. I explained the rare earth element discovery in simplified terms and outlined how GreenEarth Minerals was developing the resource with environmental safeguards. But the most valuable thing my father gave me wasn't the land or its minerals, I continued. It was the understanding that true wealth comes from what you create for others, not just what you accumulate for yourself. With that introduction, I announced the establishment of the Gregory Collins Community Development Fund, which would receive 30% of all GreenEarth Minerals profits in perpetuity. The fund would support 3 primary initiatives: college scholarships for local students pursuing environmental or construction trades, conservation projects to protect the region's natural resources and small business development, grants focusing on sustainable local enterprises. The first scholarship I announced, looking directly at where Natalie sat, will be the Jason Collins Memorial Scholarship, named for my nephew to support students combining business and environmental studies. I saw Natalie's hand fly to her mouth. Her 12-year-old son's name being honored clearly caught her completely off guard. After the presentation and extensive Q&A with community members, the crowd gradually dispersed into small conversation groups. I was speaking with the high school principal when I felt a tap on my shoulder. Natalie stood there, expression unreadable. "We need to talk, privately." We stepped outside into the cool evening air, walking silently to a bench near the community center entrance. "Why did you do that?" "Name a scholarship after Jason," she asked, voice unnaturally controlled. "Because he's family, and because from what I've heard he's showing interest in both business and science. Dad would have appreciated that combination." She stared at the parking lot for a long moment. "This whole community fund thing, is it just to make me look bad for pursuing my legal claim?" "It has nothing to do with your claim," I answered honestly. "It's about honoring what Dad built and what he valued. The legal threats just prompted me to think more deeply about what I should be doing with this inheritance." 30% is a lot to give away," she observed. "It's not giving away. It's investing in the community that supported our family for generations." Another long silence fell between us before she spoke again. "Collins Construction is in serious trouble," she admitted, voice barely audible. "I've had to mortgage the house, and the investment accounts are nearly depleted. 3 major clients canceled projects last month." The vulnerability in her admission surprised me. "I'm sorry to hear that. What happened?" I tried to expand too quickly, took on projects beyond our capacity, trying to prove I could grow what Dad built. She gave a bitter laugh. "Turns out running a construction company is more complicated than I thought." "What about the employees who left?" "They didn't respect my leadership, said I was changing systems that didn't need changing." She shrugged. Maybe they were right. The conversation felt surreal. The first genuine exchange we'd had in perhaps decades. "I can't give you ownership in GreenEarth," I said after considering her situation. "But I do have another proposition." She looked up cautiously. "The community fund needs a director. Someone with business experience who understands both construction and this community's needs." The position comes with a substantial salary and real influence over how resources are allocated. She stared at me incredulously. You're offering me a job after I threatened to sue you. I'm offering family a chance to work together in a different way, I corrected. But it would require dropping the legal claims and committing to the fund's mission, not just seeing it as a paycheck. I don't need charity, she said stiffly. It's not charity. It's recognition that you have skills this initiative needs. But it's also not a blank check or a bailout for Collins Construction. That business succeeds or fails on its own merits. Natalie stood abruptly. I need to think. And talk to my attorney. Take whatever time you need, I replied. The offer remains open regardless. For 3 weeks, I heard nothing. The certified letters from her attorney stopped, but no communication came in their place. I proceeded with establishing the fund's legal structure and initial grant programs, leaving the director position unfilled. Then one Sunday morning, a text message appeared. Coffee at Miller's Cafe, 10 a.m. Natalie was already seated when I arrived, 2 cups of coffee on the table. I fired my attorney, she began without preamble, and I've decided to file for Chapter 11 reorganization for Collins Construction. Trying to save it was destroying everything else, including my relationship with Jason. I'm sorry, I said sincerely. She shook her head. Don't be. It's the first honest decision I've made in years. Dad built something great, but I was trying to preserve it for the wrong reasons. Pride competition with you, fear of failing the golden child role I'd created. The self-awareness surprised me. What will you do now? That depends, she said, meeting my eyes directly. Is the fund director position still available? And more importantly, could you actually work with me after everything that's happened? The position is available, I confirmed. As for working together, I think Dad would expect us to at least try. A ghost of a smile crossed her face. He always did like difficult challenges. 2 months later, Natalie sold what remained of Collins Construction to a larger regional firm that retained most of the employees. She moved into a modest house near mine and threw herself into developing the community fund with surprising passion and skill. Our working relationship remained professional and sometimes strained, but over time small moments of genuine connection emerged. She brought valuable insights about community needs that my more scientific perspective sometimes missed, and her business network proved essential for launching several initiatives. By the 1-year anniversary of GreenEarth Minerals operation, the Gregory Collins Community Development Fund had awarded 15 scholarships, funded 3 conservation projects, and provided startup grants to 7 local businesses focusing on sustainable practices. Jason, Natalie's son, had become a regular visitor to the mining operation, fascinated by both the business logistics and the geology. Standing at the observation point overlooking the carefully managed extraction area one evening, I reflected on the unexpected journey of the past 18 months. The worthless dirt that was supposed to be my disappointing inheritance had transformed not just my financial situation, but my understanding of what Dad had been trying to teach me all along. Value isn't just what something is worth in dollars. Sometimes it's the potential that only becomes apparent when you apply the right knowledge. Sometimes it's the opportunity to create something meaningful that outlasts you. And sometimes it's the chance to rebuild connections you thought were permanently broken. My phone buzzed with a text from Natalie Community Center meeting in 20 minutes. Bring the scholarship proposals. I smiled, pocketing the phone, and taking one last look at the property that had changed everything. Dad's cryptic message had been right in more ways than he could have possibly imagined. The true value had been beneath the surface all along, not just in rare earth minerals, but in the opportunity to transform a family legacy from accumulated wealth to lasting community impact. Have you ever had a family inheritance situation that surprised you? Maybe not millions in rare earth minerals, but something unexpected. Drop a comment below sharing your experience. And if this story of family redemption and looking beneath the surface resonated with you, please hit that subscribe button and share this video with someone who might need a reminder that sometimes life's greatest gifts don't look valuable at first glance. Thanks for listening to my journey from dirt to millions, and remember, true wealth isn't just what you have but what you create for others.